Okay. And so today we have KJ Glaves with us again. KJ has presented for us several times now and is a phenomenal licensed marriage and family therapist and a child mental health specialist at Protea Wellness, working with the neurodiversity population and has done many presentations in CEUs. KJ, I think you're also working on some echo stuff. Is that right?
I am, yes. Tomorrow is the first Echo if anybody has availability and would like to attend. Free CEUs, as I tell everyone.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being with us again and presenting. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Let me know if you need something.
Awesome. So today we're talking about using games for assessment and treatment, especially for neurodivergent kids and their families. Um, I feel like I should start with like a story time and like tell you how I came to this idea and like started doing this work. Because I think that's more interesting than me just dryly explaining like some of the things about games. So I started, as I do often when I'm like trying to figure out how to solve a problem with like a very particular client situation where I was like, what's going on with this kid? Because school and parents were like, he just won't attend the social skills group at school, and it's ultra important that he attend the social skills group at school. I suspect some of you have heard this kind of narrative before, right? And being somebody who's naturally curious, I was like, oh, what curriculum are you using? And I looked it up and I was like, okay, I can kind of see his point. I don't want to attend this. It looks frankly incredibly boring and also pretty reductive. And so I was kind of like I was on the kid's side, quite frankly, after looking at the curriculum and talking to the kid and being and like there's some very valid points. It was not a super engaging curriculum. It was done in a way that I think was very lectury or like very like scripted interactions and like this is exactly what you say when somebody says how are you, like these are like the three responses that are acceptable to say, and it felt very fake. This was 10, 12 years ago, something like this, early in my practice. And so like all of the stuff that we know about neurodiversity and the problems with social skills were not really being talked about then. So I also should give that historical context. I'm old now in terms of some of this stuff. Like this was 10 years ago when there were no trainings about neurodiversity. I got trained by like finding books and reading them on my own and being like, have you heard of this concept? Which I suspect some of you who are of a similar vintage to me also ended up, going through that process. That's when I met Marie, actually, back in the day. So I was like, okay, this is boring, and also I can see their point about wanting to get this particular kid to interact with peers more, because everyone wants social connection. Everyone wants to be connected to others, and this kid endorsed wanting social connection. It wasn't like the kid was anti getting along with people and talking to people. It was more, this curriculum I think is stupid. And again, couldn't argue there. So I was trying to solve a very real client problem. As I thought about it, I was like, okay, I can see the dilemma here. There's a need. The way the school and parents are trying to fill the need isn't working for my client. What would? So I am a gamer. I like story games. I like board games. I'm not much of it. I don't do much D&D. I know a little bit, but I'm more of like a story games. We'll talk about the difference in a bit. And so I brought in a story game called The Quiet Year, which is a really fun story game where you draw a map and you live out a year in the life of a community by talking about what happens in each week of the year. It's very beautiful. You get an illustrated map at the end, and I played it with this kid, and then other kids spotted like that I had this new thing as they did. I was school based, so I had a toolbox, like a literal toolbox, because my husband got tired of the cheap boxes the agency got me falling apart, which they did about every 6 months. So my husband brought me a DeWalt black and yellow giant toolbox that I carried all my school things in. I'm like walking into school carrying this giant box. All these parents are like, oh, what are you here for? Thinking like, I'm there to fix something or something ridiculous. And I'm like, I'm a child therapist. It was a great look and it was a wild time. I did that job for 4 years. But the other kids that I saw spotted this new card game, as they thought, and they were like, can I play? And I didn't see a reason why not. And I ended up playing The Quiet Year with at least 4 kids that in those couple weeks. And I realized here's a group. Here's something that like my clients would really enjoy interacting with each other. It would be fun, it would be enjoyable, and it would be social skills. So I went to my supervisor, and like as you do, anybody who has a supervisor in an agency world, like they have mandates they have to fill, they have things they want to check off. They wanted groups because they frankly needed us to be look busier on paper. And so when I offered to run a group, my supervisor was like, yes, what type of group do you want to run? Now, I couldn't exactly say, I want to run a group where all we do is play games, because that's not going to fly in the world of evidence-based practice. So I said, I want to run a social skills group. And my supervisor was like, great, like we could always use a social skills group. And I joked that I was not lying, but I was deeply massaging the truth, because I did not explicitly teach a single social skill in the entire 3 years, I believe, I ran that group. The only social skills related thing I did was everyone had to introduce themselves, say their age, and then we had a question of the week, which the kids got to pick, and it often ended up being, what's your favorite Pokemon? What video game are you playing? And I love this group so much. I also had interns in the group. My other favorite part of running this group was that my interns never failed. I would have these brand new, they're from Antioch or Seattle U, and they would want to be in my group because they heard that there were lots of kids that showed up. It was guaranteed hours. I was very popular. They would come, and like they'd come to the first group, and after we put away the games, they'd always like follow me back to my desk, and I was waiting for it because I knew exactly what they were going to ask. They're like, Katie Jo, were all those kids autistic? And I'm like, pretty much, yeah. Like, why do you ask? Why is that important? And the thing is like, they're like, well, they were so social. Because the reality was, playing games is a form of social interaction that's enjoyable. People engage more with it. It is truly fun. It is very, like, my clients showed so much insight and grew so many skills while playing games. There was zero social skills instruction. There was mediation between certain interactions between clients because people had disagreements, and I would support them in resolving them. But there was never let's sit down and talk about how to have a fight, or how could you phrase this differently to help your friend hear you? It was very natural, very Ross Green. For those of you who know Ross Green, I would throw in some collaborative problem solving to resolve dilemmas within the group. And I was amazed at how well games worked. And then I started using them in individual sessions. I'd always done a little bit, but I started like thinking strategically about how I'm using them. Why this game with this client? Why would this game be supportive for things that the client needs to needs to work towards? What's important? What are things that this game might bring up? So I started being more strategic. I also started using them in family sessions. I'm a family therapist. I love family therapy. The more people, the better. I am in the minority because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a family of 7 people. That's great. Let's do a family session. I always demand the biggest office wherever I work because I'm going to have the most people in my office. Love big families. Bring the grandparents. Bring the family dog. That's also fun. I'm all about people bringing their pets to session. Pets are part of the family, as I tell families. So I started using them with families. And parents look at you kind of like you have 6 heads. However, what I found is that by having families play certain types of games, I can see the family patterns more so than I could if I didn't have them play a game. And it was really fun to like watch. I remember one game, it was a cooperative board game. So the whole family's working together to like complete a puzzle. And I noticed this very interesting family pattern of everyone would intervene to like tell the youngest kid what to do. And this kid didn't need help. This kid was playing the game pretty well. In fact, I'd argue the kid was playing better than the parents sometimes. And it was a really interesting post-game discussion when I asked them, like, I noticed this pattern. Is this true at home? And the family was really able to dig into, yeah, like, like kind of why they felt this kid needed more help, and like pointing out that maybe that was not a helpful pattern for the kid to feel competent. And it ended up being a really, really good discussion. I don't think I would have gotten that pattern as quickly if I hadn't had them play a game. If I had stuck to talk therapy, I think it would have taken me maybe an additional 4 to 6 weeks to get that kind of information, because it really did take, like, I could see it in my office happening in front of me. That is the value of games. So why games? They're fun and enjoyable. They also level the playing field. They are also they're great for clients who have a little bit of like resistance to being like the patient, or like they don't, or they've been like the client and they don't enjoy that role. If I'm playing a game with a client, I'm engaging with them on a more equal playing field. It's a very feminist approach in some ways. So I really appreciate that. And so I love equaling the playing field in that way. So I play with my clients. They can encourage people to work together, particularly families. They teach a bunch of skills. They're tangible, practical, that you can play them in many settings. You can get complicated games, you can get simple games. I have a great variety, and you can play them with all ages. They also are great for equalizing, like if there's vast age difference between children in a family, it can be really interesting to have them all play a game together. And like, especially in the co-op world where they're all working together, it can help them equalize some degree of like power and relationship, and work together in a different way. It's a really cool thing to watch. So I'm a big proponent of gaming in therapy. I always tell people there's different types of games you can pick. In fact, there's a lot of games. And being strategic about what you use and then your familiarity with these games. Please don't do the thing I occasionally see my poor interns try to do, which is they're like, I've never played this game before. I'm going to play it for the first time in session with a family. No. I host a monthly board game night for my office solely for this reason. Because congratulations, interns, you get to come and you can try out these games with me, and we can talk about all the potential problems that can come up. Occasionally we play games and they're like, oh, I can see how this could go bad as a teenager. I'm like, yeah, it could. Also, how would you steer it differently? So it's important to play games yourself. Not everyone has been exposed to the wide variety of games that exist in this world. I will encourage you to look around and see what types of games you might enjoy as well. The other thing is I don't play games I don't enjoy. There's a lot of board games and role-playing games out in this world, and some of them I really, really hate. Especially truly hate Candyland with the burning passion of 1,000 Suns. It is the worst game, and there was a copy of Candyland in every single office where I did my internship. Every office had a copy of Candyland. I finally started going in there and preemptively removing it so the kids could be like, where's Candyland? I'm like, oh, we don't have it today. Darn. I hate Candyland, don't like Jenga. Like I have a whole list of games that I just, don't do. I also have a theory that like, if it's a game the kid has never seen before, like if it's a new game to them, it can be really, really helpful. It can, because you're starting fresh. They're not coming in with a strategy. They're not coming in with preconceived notions about how the game's supposed to go. So I like having kind of the unusual games. I am well known for my collection of weird games. I have an advantage. My husband loves board games, and we have 500 board games in our basement. Anybody local to Seattle, hit me up for a board game night. I do truly have more board games than I know what to do with. And my husband will often, for birthdays and Christmas and whatever, buy me a board game and be like, I got you a game for work, because my husband knows me well. Although my 5-year-old started to steal some of those games, which is, now we have to buy 2 copies, one for home and one for work. So games are really important. I tell people there are 3 types of games that I use. And I'm going to run through the categories. There's cooperative board games, there's competitive board games, and then there's role-playing and story games. So cooperative board games are things like Forbidden Island, Castle Panic's another really good one. Hanabi is a pretty simple card game that's pretty helpful, where if you're trying to get the cards in a certain order and you can't see your own cards, you can see everybody else's, and you have to help each other. It's a really great communication game. Bomb Squad's similar along the way. Gnomes at Night is really fun, where you're trying to work with a partner to get your gnomes to collect all the treasures before a certain time happens. They can be very, very enjoyable. The point is to work together. You are not competing against the other people in the game. You're on the same team with others. If you have never played a cooperative board game, I'm going to suggest you try it, because it really is a different style of board game. I have a lot of people in my life who think they hate board games, and then they try a co-op and they really love co-ops. I love a good co-op. I will share a slideshow of this and this content, and I will have and there's a list of the games in them. Zombicide's another really good one. There's the Forbidden series, Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert, Forbidden Sky, and now Forbidden Jungle, which I just got and I'm really excited about because it's a new game. If you're going to start with a single cooperative board game, I'm going to suggest start with Forbidden Desert or Forbidden Island. They're relatively simple, but have a significant amount of like use both for families and for clients individually. They're great for like forming a team. They're kind of an adventure-based thing. You're trying to collect treasures or the pieces to your ship to escape. So it's a very action-oriented game with no interpersonal violence, which I also really like. So the cooperative games are mostly used for family therapy and for group therapy when I'm trying to get people on the same team. They can help illuminate certain patterns of interaction, like who takes what job, you know, who wants to manage the other players, who wants to kind of tell people what to do, who kind of sits back and watch, who kind of lets other people tell them what to do, who fights in the family or in the group, who argues about these pieces. They also teach negotiation skills and planning because you have to work together and talk about like, what are you doing next? So I love the negotiation piece of it. They also teach listening. You have to work together. You have to pay attention to what other people have told you and figure out ways to use that information. They're really good for naturally teaching those skills in a way that's not fake because you get a cool outcome. You get to win. You get to fly off on your cool ship you collected all the parts of. You defeat all the monsters attacking your castle. You get to do this cool thing together. It's deeply meaningful. Competitive board games. So competitive games are probably what most of you grew up playing. Monopoly is a good example. Life, all of those games, they are pretty much the standard games that you are introduced to in childhood. Chess, checkers, Sushi Go, all of those. I like the more unusual ones, and I have some reasons for that. For one thing, the games that kids know well, oftentimes they have like family rules for, or they have a very clear idea of how you play them, or the games never end. Looking at you, Uno. Oh my gosh. Like, it's so hard to get, like, end a game of Uno sometimes. I'm like, please let this be over. I don't play Uno anymore either. That's on my no list. I have a no list for games at this point. Now, there's value to competitive games because in life, sometimes you are like clients need to know how to win and lose gracefully. And so I try to work on this with clients sometimes. It does help, not to sound really terrible here, if you can throw the outcome of the game, like, because occasionally I want my client to win and occasionally I want my client to lose, depending on what we're working on. So it's really good to know how to throw some of these games. Sushi Go is easy to throw because I can either, you know, cheat and count more points or like cheat and count less points for myself on my card hands. Yes, I know many ways to cheat. I am also scarily good at checkers now because I had a client who was like, I can beat anyone. And I'm like, bet. And I downloaded like a checkers trainer during COVID and got really scarily good at checkers. And now a lot of people won't play checkers with me anymore. And so I've learned to like fake, but I can control whether I win or lose at this point, which is good. So competitive games can be useful. I love Exploding Kittens and Bears versus Babies. The other game that's kind of competitive, but also can be great for spurring a bunch of conversations is this one. What do you mean, Family Edition? Do not get the non-family edition if you work with children. The family edition is what you want if you work with kids. But it's a really great conversation starter about like middle school, late elementary school social stuff that might be coming up and how people might react. I have a lot of clients who also use it as like a way to like talk about different situations either they've experienced or heard about. I had a client who started sorting, because it's like kind of like apples to apples. There's situations and then there's memes and you have to add the situation. I had a client that like was sorting all the all like the situation cards by like what emotion you would feel in that situation, and like totally self-chosen, by the way. I did not encourage that. The client just was interested in this idea. So I like the game. It is super useful. It can help with this relationship with other, frustration tolerance, learning how to win, lose gracefully, as I said. It can help in family situations to talk about like, you know, is it okay that sometimes you win and sometimes this other person wins? It can also be a great way to work on anxiety buildup. I have clients who get increasingly anxious as they're worried about losing. And so we can pause the game. We can talk about like a way to negotiate to like make sure the client can feel okay about it. Like it can be a really helpful in the moment kind of in vivo almost exposure piece to some of that anxiety about those pieces. You have to be pretty in tune with your client. You have to be willing like to pause, and the client has to be willing to work on that with you. But a lot of times my clients are. It's a really cool opportunity to have a good couple competitive board games around. I have less of them because I do find that they can be activating and I want to pull them out strategically. I also find that for winning and losing games, a game with a little bit of humor embedded in it helps kind of soften the blow and can make like the winning and losing part easier. Exploding Kittens and Bears versus Babies are the two that I really love for this. Love Exploding Kittens. It's pretty funny. It's one I've been using for years. So I really recommend things like that. Also, no one seems to mind when they lose and what do you meme. It just is fun to play the game because you get to look at these weird meme cards. Most of my clients are very fond of going through all the pictures. So competitive board games have their uses. Story games and role-playing games. A lot of therapists have talked about using role-playing games. That's like the D&Ds of this world. Like Games to Grow in Seattle, they do a lot with this. There's nothing wrong with D&D. And it's a lot of work for us. Like you have to GM a game, you have to like work on the game ahead of time. I have some students at Antioch where I teach who have been like volunteering with some of these D&D groups, and they're like, it is so much work to do prep. It is. It's one reason I did not use D&D at all when I was running my games group. I didn't have time. I worked in community mental health and I was working 60 hours a week. I didn't have time to sit down and plot out a campaign. So I use lots of story games. Story games are what are lovingly known as one shots, which means they're not played over 1 week. They're one-time games. Usually they can take between 2 to 3 hours. I can break them up over different time frames if I need to. I like ones where you build a world together, where you're working to create something with your client, or where you're helping a family create things together or a group. I got a lot of traction about with these games when I was running my group. They were probably the most popular thing, and I think the most helpful for most of my clients like relationship pieces. I had one particular game where I joked it was the game where everyone both learned how to lie if they didn't already know, because many of my clients did not know how to lie. And lying is actually a pretty important social skill in some ways, right? Like if you don't know how to lie, you're going to get manipulated because you think everyone's always telling you the truth. So like I appreciated when clients figured out how to use a little bit of deception. It is a useful skill for us all to acquire. And if you don't have it, you're going to get pushed around. So learning some deception skills. And then the other thing is being funny. Fiasco is really, really funny. And I watched so many of my clients like learn the power of making a room full of other kids laugh in an appropriate way. It also requires a lot of intervention from me to keep it appropriate. That was like the one drawback to Fiasco, because like Fiasco is like there's relationships between characters and there's a setting. One of the games I will recall we were playing, the setting was in the Old West. And the first thing my teenage clients do in the group is, we're going to the saloon. And I'm like, they only serve root beer in this town. And everyone went, Katie Jo, you're no fun. I'm like, nope, they're only root beer. And from that point on, it was only root beer moving forward in all games. That was the only beverage anyone ever drank, because I just had to step in and make a rule, because otherwise we would have gone to an inappropriate place, and I am not doing that with a room full of teenagers when I worked in community mental health. They were already loud enough, and I did not need them to pretend to be drunk. So there are some intervention pieces with games like this. You have to be aware of appropriateness and triggers for clients. So it can be a challenge, but getting clients to engage and co-create a world with each other and see the value of like making each other laugh, building on other people's ideas. Like clients found it really cool in Quiet Year. You're drawing this cooperative map and you're talking about what happens over the course of a year. When somebody used a previous idea, a client had drawn an abandoned ruin and somebody else started a project to explore the ruin, like my clients saw I think pretty tangibly like, oh, it's cool. It feels good when somebody uses my ideas and I want to use other people's ideas. It can be a really fun thing, and like it encourages people to be like, oh, this is it, like this interaction is enjoyable. My favorite part about the group I ran is that people kept coming back. Clients would come back for like 3 years, like almost 3 years. I had clients attend this group because it was enjoyable. And I think it was beneficial. I had one kid whose teacher approached me like a year after the kids started in group, and the teacher was like, "What did you do?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like that was a weird statement." And the teacher was like, "The kid's funny now. Like he was never funny before." And I found that statement like because the kid had learned the power of humor, and I thought it was pretty cool. So I'm a big fan of the story game, and that they can be used to kind of co-create these worlds. So some of my favorite story games that I think are very, very useful are Fiasco. If you moderate for appropriateness, if you're working with younger kids, please be careful about that one. Quiet Year is really good. Microscope, which is a timeline game where you explore different events in a kind of a scope of history or a fantasy kind of world. Those are kind of the big ones. Our Last Best Hope is pretty good too. It's an adventure story where you have to save the world. It can be very deeply enjoyable. So I love how reinforcing these games are for clients. They truly have fun playing, and that is deeply meaningful. I think that sometimes teenagers in particular can see therapy as not enjoyable. Having games and like being willing to enter that world with clients can make it more enjoyable. You also get a lot of information about fears because clients are often like creating characters that are meaningful to them in some way. So you're able to like look at what they're doing, and you might have ideas or insight as to like, you know, how that relates to their own personal stuff, like what things come out in games. That can be good and bad. Obviously, you do have to be careful about like triggers for clients in group situations. Sometimes, if I knew that we were like going to play a game that might get into more personal territory, like I would have clients kind of have a no list of topics they didn't want in the game to kind of keep certain things out. That's a story game kind of agreement that's helpful to have. There are story games that are, if you're working with adults and you want to go like into deeper stuff, there are story games that kind of are even more intense than the ones I play with my clients. I would not play this with teens, but there's one called Penny for My Thoughts where you're trying to recover memories in a mental hospital. And it's a really interesting game because a lot of people, like it ends up bringing like up a lot of personal stuff. I didn't play it with my group for very obvious reasons, but I think there would be value in playing it with the right set of clients who wanted to do that kind of deep work. There's another I lovingly call Family Therapy. That's a story game. My Daughter, Queen of France, where you're like figuring out why a father and daughter are estranged from each other. I love it. It's based on Shakespeare, which is another one of my passion areas. So it makes me really, really happy for so many reasons. But you can play that kind of game with clients. You need to figure out, you know, which games you're comfortable with, and you need to try them out. I see I have some questions, and I will absolutely take more questions in as well. So let's see. Yeah, so many games. I will email you games. Yes, I love the recommendations for game stores. Mox Boarding House is great. Meeples in West Seattle. There's lots of board game places in the Seattle area because Seattle. So if you're local to Seattle, and I know Portland and other cities probably have similar board game stores. Let's see. Online stuff. Here's my thing is I am not as big into the online world. I do use the Quiet Year can be done like through like a shared whiteboard thing in Zoom or Meet or similar, and I've done that. I'm not as into online stuff just because there's so many HIPAA concerns. So I've stayed away from that for the most part. I know more people have explored it than I have, so I will take recommendations. I suspect other folks have done these things. Online version of board games, yeah, Board Game Arena. I've used that a little bit during COVID. the social world building games like Minecraft or Animal Crossing, again, like I know clinicians who use them. I also know that there's some HIPAA stuff that comes up that I'm not as familiar with, so I've steered clear. But I do know that there are ways to do that. You could definitely use like something like Fiasco or Quiet Year in Minecraft. I've seen people do it. So, right. Other questions, things people are thinking about or want to know more about? I know I talk real fast. Any recommendations on games to play with adults? Okay, honestly, a lot of the games you play with teens and kids, adults also enjoy. The catch is you have to have the right adult and you have to be willing to talk to them about why. Most kids and teens and parents will accept that therapy with children and teens involves play. Adults are usually think therapy has to be more serious or like more talking oriented. I think that it's about you explaining the benefits more so with adults. I think also like if it's an adult who already plays a game, I would invite them to bring in the games. If you invited my husband to do that in therapy, you'd end up with a lot of games. I would really, really, really recommend asking people about the games they enjoy. I do have clients who bring in games they want to show me. In fact, I learned about what do you mean? Because a client brought it in and was like, I got this game for Christmas, Katie Jo, can we play? And I was like, yes, of course we can play. And I ended up loving it and buying a copy for all my offices because I love it so much. For adults, again, like you can go to the more serious story games. You have a little bit more of that ability. There's a great gaming group or story game publishing group called Less Than Three Games, the less than sign than the three. And so Heart Games, but I really like their games for adults. I play them with my friends. They came out with one, I think it was Eulogy, that was really good. There's another one about like kind of animals and like paradise kind of style, like an Eden in some ways, that was really good as well. So a bunch of those games are useful and worth trying. The catch is you need to try them first. So get your friends together and tell them you're going to play some games this weekend. That's my advice, is to find your people who want to try games with you. Puzzles, yeah, puzzles are great too. Like having an activity. I'm an art therapist as well, so I will always have art supplies. The other thing I've learned is I work at a table and I have my clients usually sit across from me at a table. I don't have the traditional therapist couch setup. And I just leave things on the table. And I also always have fidgets available and like easy to grab. Almost all of my clients will grab stuff and use them. What I have found is that availability makes a big difference. Oftentimes, therapy offices are not really well set up for folks who need to fidget or move. They're set up for traditional talk therapy, which means a chair and maybe a couch, or 3 chairs that don't move at all. Chairs that move, fidgets, art supplies, a box of beads and wire in front of a client. Sometimes I just grab a handful of pipe cleaners and like drop pipe cleaners on the table. And like all of my clients end up doing things with their hands, and that is deeply meaningful. And a lot of times I don't even like at this point, like everyone knows where all my stuff is. So they'll go and they'll grab supplies that speak to them that day, or grab a game and ask to play. I think that's really important. And I think sometimes we miss offering that, especially to adults. If you work with adults, you have to be more proactive about offering those kinds of tools, because they're going to assume they can't access them, or they're going to assume it's not allowed. And so I would really encourage all of you to have those things available. If you're like I was early on in working in community mental health, build yourself a box of supplies and carry it with you. I was a mobile therapist for many, many years, and I learned, first of all, I probably did great damage to my back by carrying so many things. A backpack full of stuff, plus my big old box, plus another bag with my computer in it that the agency made me carry. Why they made me carry a computer, I still don't know, because I never used it in schools. My other favorite agency initiative that hits on this is they had the initiative to let's do concurrent documentation, where you document while you talk to your client, which is ADHD hell, y'all. I could not do that. I would just, that would be impossible for me. And I actually raised my hand in the meeting where they were all like, we're gonna do this. Everyone's doing this. I'm like, I work with 5-year-olds and paint. Am I excused from this initiative? And they went, okay, you're excused. So I got out of that one by pulling the I'm an art therapist card. Very useful card sometimes. But in all honesty, y'all, like finding these things, finding these things that you can use, and the things you are comfortable with, games you like and are willing to play. Try from a few different categories. You are not going, you don't have to choose the same games as me or the same games as anyone else, but you need to find games that appeal to you and that work for your brain. And that work for your client's brain. Sometimes watching your clients find things that bring them joy is pretty cool. Puzzles are great for that. You know, I'll also, Marie, give a shout out to Carcassonne, which is like a puzzle game. So a lot of my clients really like trying to build the cities and fit in their tiles that they drew. And that can be a really enjoyable thing for many of my folks as well. So finding those things that make your clients happy and able to enjoy, like have therapy work for them, because that's truly crucial. It can be very hard if we don't do things that work for our clients. Other questions or thoughts?
I guess I'm thinking with like online, I do telehealth. I know like a handful of people here do telehealth exclusively too. And I was just thinking like I might just like I have a lot of clients who play games, especially story games, and I might just have them like show me, like just share the screen.
Yeah, no, and I do that when I do telehealth with folks sometimes. Like, show me your Minecraft world. Show me what you're doing online. Like that can be a great sense of sharing. A client sharing screen can be very meaningful. Like I think that offering to play with clients is helpful if you can do it like in person. I think there are ways to do it online. I do know, I don't know the HIPAA's in and outs, and I think I would encourage everyone to consult to find out more about that if that's something you want to do. You know, I have clients who play Stardew Valley, and I play Stardew Valley, and we talk a lot about Stardew Valley together, and that can also be great. Sims World, yes. And The Sims, for those of you who work with folks who are questioning gender pieces, the Sims added a ton of options for gender stuff, which is amazing and has been very useful for many clients to sort through like what feels good. And I love that that's an option now. So I've had lots of clients explore using The Sims, which is pretty cool. It's nice to have options. Any other thoughts or questions?
One thing that is not directly related to this, or is really tangential to this, but when my dad died, my nephew created a memorial to him in Minecraft. And it was such a cool way for him to mourn his grandfather, and also was like a way that he could be interactive with his dad and building it together, and just really highlighted for me when people say things like, you know, video games and the internet are destroying social interactions and making it so kids don't have social skills. I'm like, it's changing some of the ways that we do social skills, but it's also offering some of these opportunities and just this incredible, like, really powerful way of interacting and processing grief.
Yes, and like I think change is a great like I think it's I use the word change too. Like the internet gaming has changed things. I will say I think there's value to like in-person things, and there's value to online interactions. Both have value. They do different things for different people. And I think that that's also a great conversation to have I have it with a lot of my clients. What's good about your online interactions? What helps you? Like a lot of my clients have friends from across the world, and it's pretty cool. And like what's harder, what's like are there things from that make your life harder? It's kind of that like having a conversation and being non-judgmental about it, I think, is really important, so we understand the meaning and value in the client's life and let them ultimately make the call about what's good for them. I think that's very valuable. I am an in-person therapist. Like I will be very real with y'all. Like I don't enjoy telehealth nearly as much as I enjoy in-person things. So I do more analog in-person activities, and I think there's value there. And like, I love seeing my clients' Minecraft worlds when we're doing telehealth, and I love hearing about what they're doing online. So I think we could have both. So one more thing in chat. Oh yes, yeah. I don't know if I heard that one, but I've seen similar things. But there's so many cool ways to to work through pieces of ourselves using all these different media. Games are very, very important for many, many people. I think that's the other thing, is it's really easy to dismiss games as something that little kids do. Games are meaningful to a lot of adults. And if we are talking about that and respectful of that, we will learn a lot about our clients. So I will encourage you also to take the time to learn about what games are meaningful to your clients and why. All right. If there's no more questions, then I guess I'll turn it back to Ellie.
Thank you so much. I've been reading several messages from people just about how much fun this is. And just like you were talking about at the beginning, it's fun to share a story instead of just talking about a modality. The way that you present, I think, just really highlights that this is such a fun, inviting way of engaging. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us today.
Thank you. I really enjoy being able to talk about this because it's definitely like my nerdy interest coincides with my therapy interest, which is also like, again, like my nerdy interest is definitely therapy too. So it's nice to be able to talk about them in the same place.